Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Works Committee of September the 10th, 2021. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Members are reminded of the 5-minute time limit, which will be adhered to during this meeting. Members can submit another request to speak if they require more time to ask questions or make comments. Please note that quorum is present. Councillor Collins and Councillor Nan have provided regrets due to personal reasons, and Councillor Whitehead is absent on an approved leave of absence. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there is one change to the agenda. We have an added delegation request from Penny White respecting the Parkside Cemetery and Parkside Avenue in Ward 13 for a future meeting.
Thank you. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion on the agenda as amended? I don't see any hands. Will require an electronic vote. And it is on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on. Delegation requests. Item 6, 6.1 and... Sorry?
Through you, Madam Chair, my apologies. This is Alicia from Clerks. We've just skipped over item 4.1, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting.
You're right, I did. Sorry about that. Item 4.1 is the minutes of August the 11th, 2021. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve those minutes? Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Farr. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, the electronic vote is on the screen. Momentarily. There it is.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Requests. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegation request listed as items 6.1A, 6.1B, and 6.2 for future meeting? Moved by Councillor Ferguson. I would like to second them because they do relate to my ward. So they'll be moved by Councillor Ferguson and seconded by myself. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, require an electronic vote.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. Item 7 is consent items. 7.1 is the 2020 Energy Report PW 21049. May I please have a mover and seconder to put the report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Denko, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Any discussion on this? Councillor Jackson, and then Councillor Ferguson.
Well, thank you, Chair Vanderbeek. I just wondered if, with the outstanding leadership of Director DeAngelo of Fleets and Energy Department, and with Manager Chessman, if either one is available, I just think even some highlights and a synopsis of this annual energy report. It's always a good news story. It may not be the most attractive. It might not be the star of what we do in the corporation. It might not generate the headlines, but it's an important service that this department does to our community, saving taxpayers' dollars and providing the proper environmental energy programs in place for whether it's street lighting, whatever the case might be in our facilities, solar panels, all that good stuff. So with you and the committee's concurrence, I think even just a quick highlight from the department of what they've done, the highs and maybe any concerns would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Rome, are you here to do that?
Chair. Through the chair, I'll get started, and then I'm going to turn it over to Linda Campbell, our Superintendent of Energy Initiatives, and she can walk us through the key highlights. So just
Rome, just before you start, would you mind identifying yourself and your position in the corporation?
Right.
Thank you.
Rome DeAngelo, Director of Energy Fleet and Facilities. I'd just like to highlight to committee that the annual energy results in 2020 is a little bit different than previous years due to buildings being closed, operations being shut down, and programs being canceled in recreation and other areas of the organization as a result of the global pandemic. So those are highlights that we're going to reflect in this report here. It is an anomaly type of year compared to previous years. On that note, Tom Chessman's absent today, but I will turn it to Linda Campbell, our Superintendent of Energy Initiatives, and she'll walk us through some of the key highlights in 2020.
Great. Linda?
Good afternoon. I'm Linda Campbell, Superintendent of Energy Initiatives. Thank you for having us to present some highlights of the energy report. I'll start off with some really good news. Overall, we can say that we have had a utility spend of $37.7 million, which is actually, in fact, a 7% cut from over 2019. So although natural gas spend was up, due basically by 19%, due basically to carbon charges that were introduced, the federal carbon charges that were introduced in April, and additional volumes that were purchased because of the new biosolids plant. Electricity is down 4%, and fuel is down 22% in spending. Fuel largely due to the decrease in consumption as well as wavering prices, obviously, in that. Our energy intensity reduction, which is basically the indicator that it's the key performance indicator that lets us know that we are actually moving in the right direction. We have had a reduction of 35% from our base year. And what that means is that overall our buildings are using less. Since last year, our intensity has decreased by 14%. So that's a good sign. Now, it is difficult to isolate the specific impacts of COVID. As we know, although buildings were shuttered, as Rome did mention, we are unable, because we did have to keep the heat on, we did have to keep the lights on in certain buildings, obviously. We did repurpose some of the buildings for other use. So, it's very difficult to be specific with what the impacts of COVID are and what is actually attributed to energy efficient, active priorities. The other thing is that corporate GHG emissions inventory is a reduction of 43% from the base year, which is a great thing. It is important to understand that this is our 2019 report, so we are down 1% from 2018. GHG emissions is always based on waiting for emission factors that are released by the government and by the GHG protocol, and so that's why we are generally 2 years in behind. In this past year, we introduced the revised Corporate Energy and Sustainability Policy Update. And one of the key factors in that was that we introduced a net zero target for 2050. So that means that we are all going to be working towards trying to get to net zero. Our energy strategies and program savings and avoided costs this year was $11.9 million. So that breaks down in that we had billing recoveries, so billing errors that we found with the utility of approximately $173,000. We had energy conservation avoided cost of approximately $3.5 million. We received incentives from various programs within the government, Save on Energy, of $160,000. We had savings of and avoided costs on our natural gas hedging of approximately $624,000. And we had global adjustment avoided costs on our Class A assets of approximately $7.3 million. So those are great savings. Another highlight perhaps is our 10% reduction in fuels and consumption, so diesel, gasoline, and CNG. And again, these consumption basically can be attributed largely to changes in transit and how we're using our fleet over the last year because of changes to programs and routes within the city, whether the HSR was actually running and not. So that was some of it. I'm not sure. I think those are the basic highlights. I'm not sure if there's anything else that, everything else we can attribute to in the report. You can see in the appendices, and it's all there.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Councillor Jackson, is there anything else you wish to ask? Good. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And let me first start by saying, good picture, Rome. If I didn't know better, I'd say you've been running for office with that photograph. That looks great. And it came across very nice. But the thing that jumped out at me is that we're already at 43% of our target on natural gas reduction, greenhouse gas reduction. And I think our target for 2030 was to be at 50%. And so either to Linda or Rome, we shouldn't have, but it won't be easy, but we should be able to hit the 2030 target of 50% reduction if we're already there at 2020. Would you agree with that?
Through the chair, absolutely. There's a number of initiatives that we're working through. We're working with Trevor in public health. Trevor in public health with the climate change emergency action plan. There's a number of approvals this year in terms of converting the small light vehicles from combustion type engines over to electric, which will contribute to a reduction in emissions. So we're on our way to hit that target in 2030, a lot earlier than we've stated at the 2030, but our biggest challenge is going to try to hit the 2050 zero emissions. But there's a number of initiatives that we're working through to target these reductions.
Okay, I hope somebody sends this through to Environment Hamilton, because every time a delegate from Environment Hamilton comes in delegation, they throw tomatoes at us. But they should be celebrating this with us. To be at 43% already for the 2030 target is a huge win for the city. And I could congratulate Rome, you, Lyndon, and Tom, and the rest of the energy group for hitting that milestone. My only other question is, I see the only thing that increased was natural gas consumption. And the reason I read in the report is being increased is because the biosolids facility come online. Is the biosolids energy, like natural gas, not paid for by the consortium that operates it?
I'm going to have to turn to Linda.
She got her hand up, Rome. She's going to say that.
Hi, Linda. Through the chair. Yes, the indirectly or directly, we pay the bill first. We manage that we manage that purchase of the fuel for that location, and then basically it is charged to them. So yes, they do pay it, but we record the fact that it is still our asset and we are still responsible in fact for the fuel in the first place. So that is why
is that not skewing our consumption numbers then, because it's not our operations that is consuming it? Is there a reason why we're buying it and reselling it to the consortium rather than they buy it directly from natural gas?
That is a decision that I was not involved in, but I'm going to assume and make a pretty, when we did talk to them about it, it was because there is a specific gas meter that comes through that location, and that a lot of the entire property is metered on one gas meter. And in order to take that load and create those, it was necessary for the city to purchase that. And this is actually a good thing too, because I'm not I'm not really sure of the specifics of the contract, but I do believe that it's good that we have visibility of exactly kind of what's going on in terms of their utilities, because we do actually claim that inventory as well.
Councillor?
Okay, but I mean, the Biosolid plant is a good thing. We're no longer land applying, and we got a good operator operating it. I'm just worried that it skews our energy consumption numbers when a third party is using it, but it's put on our account, if you will, which can. I assume that would have an impact on the greenhouse gas consumption too. Then would it?
Yes, that's correct, through the chair. Yes.
Okay, I wouldn't mind if someone could just send me an email on why we do that.
Certainly.
Probably have to talk to somebody in water, but it'd be interesting to know why we're doing that, because I don't think we make any money reselling it. Probably sell it to them at cost, but it skews our numbers. So apart from that, congratulations to everyone. It's a great report, and thank you very much for the great work that you and all your staff over there in Rome are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further speakers, so we'll just require an electronic vote, and we're talking about item 7.1, which is the annual energy report, and the vote's on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. The next item is 7. The intersection control list. The report is PW 21001D. May I please have a mover and seconder to put the report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Farr. Thank you. And is there any discussion on this? Councillor Jackson.
Madam Chair, just one quick question to staff, whoever's here, if it's the Acting Director Mike Field or Acting Superintendent Ryan Krantz. I counted over 200 of these stop control measures that are on this list, massive amount. Can I just assume, and I see a number of them in my ward, but they're all over the city. Is this basically traffic department doing a sweep across the city where there's been, if you will, historically, no controls of stop at the end of a court, at the end of a side street, going into a main artery, whatever, and where staff have said new regulations, whatever, they should be these type of controls. In other words, basically housekeeping, but historically no stop control measures, but now maybe under new regulations they should be. That's my only question, because there's over 200 of them that I counted across our wards. Chair Vanderbeek, that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Mike Field is here. Mike?
Through the chair to the councillor, Mike Field, Acting Director of Transportation Operations and Maintenance. You are absolutely correct. That is housekeeping cleanup of missing stop controls or converting existing stop controls or non-stop controls yield signs to stop signs across the city. That's just some cleanup that's happened across the city, but also in there are some new subdivisions that are showing up as well.
Thank you. I don't see any further speakers. So the vote is on the screen at 7.2, intersection control list.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. We're moving on to motions, and 11.1 is Roxborough Avenue Planters, Ward 4. Councillor Marula, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Jason Farr from Ward 2. Whereas the Roxborough Avenue ball hockey rink is an asset to the Crown Point East neighborhood, whereas the installation of floral planters to replace the existing knockdown bullards will provide attractive and effective control from vehicles from entering the ball hockey area and illegally parking. And whereas there is currently no funding in the horticulture section for the proposed enhancement, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to purchase and install 12 floral planters at a capital cost of $7,200 to be funded from the Ward 4 Special Capital Reinvestment Discretionary Fund. B, that $3,300 for the annual planting and maintenance of the planters be added to the Environmental Services Division's 2022 annual base operating budget. And C, that the mayor, Fred Eisenberger, and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of the planters on Roxborough Avenue with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Merla. Any discussion respecting item 11.1? I see none.
Through you, Madam Chair, we
I
do
do
have
see one.
Farr on the speakers
I
list.
was just going to say, I just do see one. Councillor Farr, the floor is yours. I can't hear you. I'm giving you time.
Alicia, I think I'll have to talk to you offline. There's something technically happening with my... I just wanted to say, Madam Chair, that I feel obligated for a few reasons to chime in here. Number one, this is my old inner city school. I was the valedictorian of Queen Mary, and this initiative, Canada's first ever sanctioned road hockey rink on a road, was beautiful enough, but I just wanted to also commend the councillor for making it obviously even more beautiful with not only a considerable enhancement of an already safe facility, but obviously the beautification as it relates to the wonderful award-winning work of our horticulture department. So I happily second this, and looking forward to meeting up with Councillor Marula sometime. I made the offer last summer for him to meet me at the Honorable, what is the park right next door? The Honorable John C. McKenzie?
Bob McKenzie, that's correct.
Bob McKenzie, yeah, I thought I was going to say Doug McKenzie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Farr.
And I see no further speakers, so the vote is on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. Item 11.2, park pathway improvements. Councillor Danko, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could get a seconder. Councillor Marula, thank you. Whereas Allison Park is at 51 Piano Drive, whereas Bruce Park is at 145 Brucedale Avenue, whereas Captain Cornelius Park is at 150 Mountbatten Avenue, and whereas the park pathways offer a valuable active transportation link to pedestrians and bike users in Ward 8 and beyond, and whereas portions of the asphalt pathways at Allison Park, Bruce Park, and Captain Cornelius Park have degraded and require repairs. Therefore, be it resolved that $91,000 of the funding be allocated from the Ward 8 Special Capital Investment Reserve to support the disposal and replacement of portions of the asphalt pathways at the aforementioned parks, and that the GM of Public Works be authorized and directed to approve and execute all required agreements and documents, etc. And just really quick for committee, I'm sure everybody's noticed people are out in their neighborhoods doing a lot more walking and spending more time in the parks recently. So we've had a number of residents come forward with some requests for repairs to their parks when they're pushing strollers or people with mobility issues looking for a bit of a smoother pathway through the park. So we're able to work with staff and do some repairs to these specific pathways. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion respecting 11.2? I don't see any, so the electronic vote will be on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. And 11.3 is a motion about Upper James Street floral planters in Ward 8. Councillor Danko, please introduce this motion.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If Councillor Marula would second this as well, thank you. So this is...
How come nobody appreciates where I was on floral planters? That's all right, folks. Carry on.
Thank you for the hardworking councillor from Ward 6 for also volunteering. Whereas the report making Upper James more pedestrian friendly was approved in June of 2020, and council recommended several pedestrian related improvements for Upper James Street. And whereas recommendation B of that report directs staff to install floral planters in sections of Upper James Street north of Fennel. And whereas there is currently no funding in the horticultural section for the proposed enhancements, therefore be it resolved that the supply and install of a maximum of 32 floral planters at a capital cost of $16,000 be funded from the Ward 8 Special Capital Reinvestment Discretionary Fund, and that $6,400 for the annual planting and maintenance of the planters be added to the Environmental Services budget, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized and directed to execute and any required agreements and documents, etc. So then just real quick on this one, if committee recalls that the report for the pedestrian improvements to Upper James was completed last year. That work is currently underway with relocating some signals and other pedestrian improvements for that portion of Upper James. It's north of Fennel, so between Fennel and the Claremont Access and the Ketty Trail. Seeing a lot more pedestrian use now that the Ketty Trail is complete. And one of the really important parts of that report was to try to increase the aesthetic appeal of that area and also protect pedestrians from the traffic on Upper James. And one of the ways that we were considering that was installing street trees and planters and that kind of thing to add a buffer between the sidewalk and the traffic lanes. Unfortunately, working with staff, there's not a lot of soil room available in that section of Upper James. There's a lot of utilities and buried infrastructure, so street trees were really unfortunately not an option. So the second best thing is a number of floral planters along that section, which I think will achieve those goals of protecting the pedestrians from the traffic, creating that buffer, and also a very big aesthetic improvement to that section of Upper James, and it's definitely needed there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion respecting this item? No? All right. The vote is on the screen.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. The next item is of motion. Are there any notices of motion that we're not aware of at this point? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 13, which is general information and other business. We do have an item 13.1. Councillor Pearson, I see that you are asking to speak. Do you want to speak before we do the amendments, or would you like to speak for other business after?
It's just general questions, general business, Madam Chair, so I can do it after. I just want to ask some updates of staff on a few items. Thank you.
All right. So we'll deal with item 13.1, which is amendments to the outstanding business list. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the amendments? Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on this? Does that mean you'd like to speak, Councillor Jackson, or are you saying no, thank you?
Is this the time where I didn't want to step in front of Councillor Pearson, but I have a question on one of the items with a new due date. Is this the time, or should I let Councillor Pearson go first?
No, it would be this time because she's not addressing the outstanding business items. So if you'd like to speak, the floor is yours.
Again, if Acting Director Mike Field is still around, Madam Chair, 13.1. Point B, point C, automated speed enforcement, known in the community mostly as photo radar cameras. I see that looks like there's going to be a comprehensive report coming to your next meeting, Chair Vanderbeek, September 20th. And I'm just looking for confirmation from Acting Director Field. Mike, I believe the trial period of the year is over with the photo radar cameras in a multitude of locations. Will it be both the data from the results of the trial, and will staff be presenting some options for the future, including the opportunity, if committee and council wish to make it a permanent program, what the cost might be, things like that. Maybe just a cursory overview of what will be coming on September 20th, Chair Vanderbeek, especially my community I know is interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Field, please.
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct. All the things that you mentioned are what is contained in that report. So an overview of the pilot results and then recommendations on what we propose going forward with that program.
That's the assurance I was looking for, Chair Vanderbeek. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? I see none. So we will go to a vote.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously, 8-0.
Thank you. And Councillor Pearson, you had some questions or some information.
No, I had a couple of questions just on some issues that I'm patiently waiting for to be completed in the ward, but I'm getting more and more residents wondering what statuses are. So if I could just leave it with staff, they can get back to me. So this year, all of Hamilton had, I think all the wards had three neighborhoods where 40-kilometer neighborhood signs are to be installed. I have none that have been installed in Ward 10 yet, and I'm just wondering what the status of that is. I know that locates, in order to put the posts in the ground, are backlogged. So I just want to ask staff, because I'm getting a number of complaints of ongoing speeding, and advising people that the 3 neighborhoods in Ward 10 will be signed in the near future. So if somebody can answer now, if not, I don't mind a response offline afterwards. But I just want for public information that we are pursuing it, and I'm just waiting.
Mike?
Through the chair to the councillor, you identified the issue perfectly correct. It is the locating backlog of locates, which are out of our control, that has really delayed the installation of those signs. So most definitely those installations are occurring. We are just waiting for those locates to be completed before we can go out there and install them.
I just want to be sure, because that's what I anticipated, and I believe we're 8 to 11 weeks backlogged, which also means that if we don't get to the work, then we have to start all over again, correct?
That's correct, and we're looking at abilities to install over the winter, which isn't something that's common for us when the frost sets, because it causes some issues from post leading over, that sort of thing. But we're looking at everything that we can do to make sure that we can catch up, considering the backlog of locates.
Okay, and I know they're fairly large signs, so I'm assuming we have to put them on the 4x4 posts as opposed to a metal post.
Mike?
Thank you. We've been transitioning to putting them on metal posts. We have metal posts that are sizable enough that can hold those signs for sure. So we will be using, or we are using, both 4x4 pressure treated wood posts, but also the steel posts too.
Excellent, because that might be just easier to get the steel posts in the ground. There's not as much of a hole to dig. Thank you for that. And last, I just want to, and I know it's also on the radar, it's on the list to be done, and I hate to make an issue of it again, but it's the pedestrian access signalization at Shoreview and Millen Road. I know Mike is aware of it, and the reason I keep raising this is the residents of Seasons Retirement Home have been waiting patiently for 3 years for this installation. And it's getting more and more difficult to tell them it's in the queue. So any idea how we can move this up and get that put in place?
Mike?
Through the chair to the councillor, same issue as with the speed reduction program. We have a backlog of those locates. That's one of the many projects that we have that are being impacted by that delay on locates. It is tendered, and we have a contractor on board, and we've requested locates, and we are waiting for it. We're hoping that we will get locates in time to implement that PXO as soon as possible, and we're making every effort to try and see if we can expedite the receipt of those locates the best that we can.
Super. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me that opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Excuse me, Councillor Ferguson. I'm just remembering. Councillor Jackson, did you have your name on the list to speak after? Oh no, your question was about the outstanding business list. I remember.
Correct.
Now.
Thank you, Chair, though, for checking. Thank you.
Just checking. Councillor Ferguson, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's perfectly okay, Madam Chairman. I do the same thing. So it struck me as I've seen the motions today on the beautification on the streets in the flowers. The city looks stunning, and I don't see our director of forestry online, and I don't even see our general manager, so I don't know who the acting GM is, but I think I'd like to express some great gratitude for our horticultural department under forestry for the amazing job and the beautification of Hamilton. The streets and the buildings look amazing. My only downside to it is I drove by City Hall yesterday, coming to chair AF&A, and I almost hit somebody because I was staring at City Hall because it just looks so great with those structures that they built. I was able to get my car stopped, so nothing happened. But I would like to express my gratitude to forestry, who outdone themselves again, year after year after year. So if whoever is the GM today, if they could pass that along to our horticultural staff, I'd appreciate it.
Craig, is it you?
Through you, Madam Chair, Craig Murdoch, Director of Environmental Services. I'm not the acting general manager today, but I am the director that has horticulture under me. So I will make sure that staff are aware, and they are very proud of what they do. And I agree with you, Councillor Ferguson. The city does look fantastic, and we're especially proud of the front of City Hall with Mickey Mantis out there. I hope all of you have seen him.
Yeah, Craig, I'm sorry I should have come to you directly. And, what always amazes me too, I drive by the horticultural staff working on these islands, weeding them. There's a cliche that city workers just lay in their shovel. I never see any of them stopped. They're always going. I don't know how we train these students to do that. I know some teenagers have trouble getting up in the morning and being active right from morning to night, but the staff never stop. They're always working, and I'm so proud of them. So thanks, Craig, for picking up on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Craig. And thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Are there any other items of general information or other business that anyone wants to bring forward? Seeing none, then we'll move on. We do have an item 14.1 in private and confidential. It's closed session minutes. Do we need to move into camera, or can we to discuss it, or can we just have a mover and seconder to approve the closed session minutes? Councillor Ferguson, are you just approving the closed session minutes?
Just moving it.
Okay, thank you. And I need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Marula. There isn't any discussion, so we will have an electronic vote on the screen.
Three, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Thank you. And I would like to have a mover and seconder to adjourn, please. Councillor Pearson and Councillor Farr. And we will require an electronic vote, so don't go anywhere yet.
Three, Madam Chair, that vote carries unanimously 8-0.
Great. And have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Great job, Madam Chair.
Thank you.